If you believe in destiny and stories of enduring love, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. New and original tales of romance are shared here every day, each more heartwarming than the last. Early spring softened the city with a restless, hopeful mood, and the evenings carried that cinematic glow that makes strangers feel like possibilities. Rain had just passed, leaving sidewalks slick and reflective, and from her apartment window, the lights looked like scattered promises across the streets. It was the kind of season that invites reinvention, new habits, new risks, new beginnings. And in that quiet openness, she did something she never expected. She created a profile on a dating site, not because she believed in miracles, but because she was tired of feeling like her future was already decided. She was careful with her heart. She had lived long enough to know that charm can be temporary and that words can be easy when no one has to prove them. Still, she missed the comfort of being known. The site felt like a crowded room made of screens, full of curated smiles and rehearsed introductions. She scrolled without much hope, half amused by the predictability, half disappointed by it. Then she saw him, an honest photo, a simple bio, a tone that didn't try too hard. His location caught her attention first. He wasn't from her country. He lived on the other side of the world. To the observer of destiny, that distance was the first obstacle, already standing between them like an ocean made of time zones and doubt. She hovered over the message button, thinking it was foolish to begin something that geography would almost certainly end. But curiosity has its own kind of courage. She wrote a short greeting, nothing dramatic. He answered within hours, polite and warm, asking thoughtful questions instead of offering compliments too quickly, and that small difference, attention instead of performance, made her respond again. Within days, their conversations became a quiet ritual. Morning for her was late night for him. Evenings for her were his early dawn. They learned each other through these mismatched hours, building a rhythm that required intention. At first, they talked about safe things, work, books, food, the small realities of daily life. Then, slowly, they began to share the deeper corners, why she preferred quiet cafes to crowded bars, how he had moved countries before and learned to live with longing, the private fears that usually stayed hidden behind casual jokes. 3 months can pass quickly when it is measured in messages that arrive like comfort. They spoke every day, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. They sent voice notes, short videos of ordinary moments, photos of streets and sunsets, each image a way of saying, "I'm here, I exist, and I'm thinking of you." Yet with every new layer of intimacy came the shadow of reality. Distance does not disappear simply because hearts grow close. She began to feel the fear she had tried to avoid. What if this was only a beautiful distraction? What if he was different in person? What if the chemistry lived only in carefully chosen words? She had seen enough life to know that digital closeness can create illusions. And still, she couldn't deny the tenderness that had taken root. She caught herself smiling at her phone, rereading his messages as if they were proof that something good was possible. He carried his own quiet worry. He had been serious from the beginning, not because he was desperate, but because he recognized something rare in her steadiness, yet he feared being reduced to a fantasy, the foreign man, the exciting possibility from far away. He wanted to be real to her, not just intriguing. The observer of destiny watched him wrestle with the same question that haunts all long-distance beginnings. How do you ask someone to believe in something you cannot yet touch? One night, after a long call where their laughter softened into silence, he finally spoke the truth plainly. He told her he didn't want to keep building a life inside screens. He said he wanted to come to her country, to see her city, to look into her eyes and remove every doubt that distance had planted. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was enormous. Travel meant money, time, risk, vulnerability. It meant choosing the possibility of disappointment over the certainty of staying safe. Her chest tightened. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately. Another part, the part shaped by past disappointments, urged caution. She asked practical questions. When, how long, where he would stay. He answered patiently, already thinking through details as if he had been preparing for this decision longer than she realized. Still, she hesitated, because agreeing would mean admitting that this wasn't just conversation anymore. This was a turning point. In the end, she said yes, not because she was certain, but because she was tired of letting fear make decisions for her. She agreed to meet him, to step out of the comfort of distance and into the risk of reality. After they ended the call, she sat in the quiet of her apartment, heart racing, realizing how quickly destiny can rearrange a life when it finally finds a crack in someone's defenses. The date was set, the flight was booked, and across the globe, two people began counting down the days, each holding a silent promise that when paths converge, love must prove itself not in words alone, but in presence. The waiting that followed was unlike anything she had known before. It wasn't passive or distant. It was active, filled with planning, questions, and moments of doubt that arrived without warning. As the weeks passed, the idea of him arriving shifted from exciting to terrifying. What if the connection dissolved the moment they stood face to face? What if the tenderness they had built across time zones collapsed under the weight of reality? She went back and forth between anticipation and fear, rehearsing conversations in her mind, then scolding herself for expecting too much. He felt the pressure too, though he carried it differently. Preparing for the trip meant more than packing bags and booking hotels. It meant confronting the risk of rejection in its most human form. He had invested emotionally in someone he had never touched, never walked beside, never shared silence with in the same room. Friends questioned his decision, asking if he wasn't afraid of wasting time and money on something uncertain. He answered calmly that uncertainty was the price of sincerity, and he was willing to pay it. Their conversations changed as the flight date approached. They became more honest, more careful. They spoke about boundaries, expectations, and the possibility that things might not unfold the way either hoped. These were not romantic topics, but they were necessary ones. The observer of destiny recognized this phase as the true test of their bond. Not whether they could dream together, but whether they could prepare for disappointment without losing respect for one another. The night before his departure, they stayed on a video call longer than usual. The screen captured details they would soon no longer need. How his brow furrowed when he listened, how she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous. There was laughter, but also a fragile seriousness. He admitted he was afraid of arriving and realizing he had imagined too much. She admitted she was afraid of discovering that distance had protected them from flaws they would now have to face. Saying these fears aloud did not weaken their connection, it grounded it. The day he traveled felt unreal. She followed his journey through messages sent from airports and train stations, tracking his progress across oceans and borders. Each update made the distance smaller and the stakes higher. When his final message arrived, "I've landed," her heart pounded so loudly she wondered how something invisible could feel so physical. Their first meeting was deliberately simple. No grand gestures, no crowd, no expectations beyond honesty. She waited near a cafe close to her apartment, hands clasped tightly around a paper cup she didn't need. When she saw him walking toward her, suitcase in hand, there was a moment where instinct urged her to turn away, not because she didn't want him, but because the vulnerability was overwhelming. Then he looked up, recognition clear in his eyes, and everything else fell silent. They stood facing each other, neither rushing forward. He smiled first, tentative and real. She returned it, feeling a strange mix of familiarity and novelty. This was the man she knew so well, and also a stranger she was meeting for the first time. When they finally embraced, it was brief but sincere, an acknowledgement rather than a claim. The observer of destiny marked the moment carefully. This was where imagination surrendered to truth. The days that followed were full but cautious. They walked through her city, shared meals, visited small places she loved. Conversation flowed easily at times and faltered at others, not from lack of feeling, but from adjustment. They learned each other's physical presence, the pauses, the gestures, the unspoken signals that do not translate through screens. There were moments of awkwardness, moments of quiet assessment, moments when she wondered if the spark would hold. But there were also moments of undeniable alignment, the way he listened without interrupting, the way he noticed when she grew tired and suggested slowing down, the way laughter came unexpectedly, unforced. The observer of destiny watched as the obstacle of distance transformed into a different challenge. Not whether they could connect, but whether they could choose patience while learning how to exist in the same space. Still, beneath the growing comfort, a question lingered, one neither had yet voiced. What did this visit truly mean? Was it a test, a beginning, or simply a beautiful chapter with an inevitable ending? As the days slipped by faster than either expected, that question pressed closer, demanding an answer that would require courage from them both. The question finally surfaced on an evening wrapped in soft light, when the city slowed and the streets grew quieter. They were sitting on a bench overlooking the river, the air cool enough to draw them closer without thinking. The days together had created something real, something tender, but reality was insistent. His return date loomed, unspoken yet present, like a clock ticking beneath every shared moment. The observer of destiny understood this as the point where romance must confront direction. She spoke first, her voice calm but weighted with honesty. She asked what would happen when he left, not as an accusation, not as a plea, but as a necessary truth that deserved respect. He listened, eyes fixed on the water, and answered without rehearsed promises. He admitted that he had not crossed the world to collect memories. He had come because he believed that love, when found, demands courage, not convenience. Still, he feared asking her to imagine a future that would require sacrifice from both of them. They talked openly then, with the clarity that only shared vulnerability can bring. He spoke about the life he had built elsewhere, the work he loved, the obligations that shaped him. She spoke about her roots, her family, the quiet stability she had fought to maintain. The differences were real, not romanticized. Distance, visas, careers, these were not abstract ideas, but concrete barriers. For a moment, the weight of them all seemed too heavy, threatening to undo everything they had grown together. The turning point came not through persuasion, but through recognition. He told her that what he felt with her was not excitement alone. It was peace, that for the first time in years he felt seen without performance. She realized then that what frightened her most was not the logistics, but the risk of wanting something deeply enough to change her life. The observer of destiny leaned in, knowing that love often asks for bravery disguised as choice. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object he had carried with him since the first week. A ring, simple and unassuming, chosen not for spectacle, but for meaning. He hadn't planned to propose that night. He hadn't planned anything beyond honesty. He told her he did not expect an answer immediately, nor did he expect certainty without conversation. He only wanted to say aloud what distance had taught him, that loving her was not a chapter he wished to close. Her breath caught, not because of surprise, but because of clarity. She understood that this was not a promise of ease, but of intention. She asked him if he was willing to build a future together, step by step, respecting time and fear, without rushing past the hard parts. He answered yes, without hesitation, because that was the only answer that felt true. They did not announce anything that night. They sat quietly, hands intertwined, letting the reality of what had been spoken settle between them. The proposal was not a finale, it was a beginning shaped by patience. And as the river moved steadily beside them, destiny marked the moment not as a leap, but as a conscious crossing, from possibility into commitment, from distance into direction. The days that followed carried a new tone. Their remaining time together was no longer shadowed by uncertainty, but guided by purpose. They discussed plans carefully, timelines realistically, never confusing love with impulse. When the day of his departure arrived, there were tears, yes, but also confidence. This goodbye was not an ending. It was a promise traveling across the world, determined to return and stay. They parted with the understanding that love had already proven itself, not by eliminating obstacles, but by facing them without retreat. And destiny, quietly satisfied, prepared the final chapter, one where distance would no longer define their story, but honor the journey that led them to the altar. The months that followed were shaped by intention rather than longing alone. Distance returned, but it no longer felt like an obstacle without direction. It became a bridge under construction. They spoke daily, not just about missing each other, but about plans, visits scheduled with precision, paperwork researched, careers discussed with honesty instead of avoidance. Love, they discovered, did not weaken when grounded in reality. It matured. He returned home carrying more than memories. He carried certainty. Each day apart reinforced what he had felt beside the river, that what they shared was not a moment, but a future asking to be built. She, too, felt the shift. Waiting no longer felt passive. It felt purposeful. She shared the news with her family carefully, explaining not just the romance, but the responsibility they were choosing together. Skepticism appeared, as it always does when love crosses borders, but it softened when faced with her calm confidence. The second visit came sooner than either expected. This time, the reunion was different, less nervous, more rooted. They fit into each other's lives with an ease earned through effort. He met her world fully now, family dinners, quiet mornings, routines that revealed who she was beyond conversation. She saw his willingness to adapt, to listen, to belong without trying to replace what already existed. The observer of destiny recognized this as devotion expressed through presence, not promise. When the wedding plans finally took shape, they were modest and intentional. There was no rush to impress, no need for spectacle. What mattered was meaning. On a warm afternoon, surrounded by people who had witnessed the journey rather than doubted it, they stood together beneath an open sky. The vows they exchanged were simple and clear, commitments to honesty, patience, and courage. When he looked at her, there was no trace of distance left in his eyes, only home. As they walked down the aisle hand in hand, the years of messages, time zones, doubts, and flights folded quietly into the past. What remained was the truth they had proven again and again, that love can begin anywhere, but it endures only when chosen deliberately. From the other side of the world, to the altar, they had not chased a fantasy, they had built a life. Later, as the evening softened into celebration, she realized something profound. The risk she had taken months ago, sending a simple message to a stranger, had not changed her life by accident. It had changed it because she had allowed herself to believe that distance does not diminish love when commitment gives it direction. Destiny, watching with quiet satisfaction, knew this story had reached its rightful end. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and leave a comment sharing your favorite moment. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell to receive alerts for new romantic stories. Thank you for listening, and may your own story be filled with love.